I'm Erin Pearson. I'm the host of Decisions Now, which is a podcast brought to you by eValueServe about how to leverage data and AI to improve business decisions. Today, we're joined by Charlie Render, who's the owner and managing partner at Render Analytics, and he has over a decade of experience in data analytics and AI implementation. So Charlie really brings a lot of hands-on expertise in helping organizations move beyond pilot programs to achieve measurable ROI with generative AI. His work spans from one-time analysis to ongoing enterprise-wide AI implementations, giving him a lot of really unique insight into what makes AI projects succeed or fail at scale. So Charlie, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here. That was a great introduction. Thank you.
Yeah, anytime. You have a great background, so it was easy to do. So today we're diving into a really big inflection point that we're seeing on the AI landscape, right? So we're currently doing this in January 2025, and one big trend that we're seeing is organizations are moving past the experimental phase of generative AI. So today, we're going to explore how to identify the right use cases, how to implement them effectively, and how to measure success beyond just simple efficiency metrics as well. So just to jump right in, there's a running joke in the market about pilotitis, where every AI project seems to be perpetually stuck in a pilot phase. But as we look at 2025, organizations are finally figuring out how to move beyond just the experiments to see the real results that they want to implement at scale. So, Charlie, what signals are you seeing that indicate that we're moving beyond the pilot phase and organizations are ready to fully invest in these long-term solutions?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'd say that it's kind of an obvious answer, but people are starting to, it's less about now, I'm just exploring, I'm experimenting, and people are starting to talk about things from the lens of return on investment, which is an important metric. I know it's a basic metric, but it's the ultimate metric, right? And that's kind of how we're past the pilot phase is what's profitable, what's not. So I wouldn't say we're 100% of the way there yet, where every AI project is profitable and generating a meaningful return on investment. But we are seeing indicators of winning use cases emerging. And not only that people care about that, right? I think that's really important. People are ready to reduce costs, increase revenue through AI. The fact that we have cases in some enterprises of entire teams dedicated to evaluating AI applications based on profitability tells me that I think we're at the tip of the iceberg here, where things are really going to get interesting in 2025. Companies are demanding evidence of efficiency gains,
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're seeing that quite a bit as well.
I was just going to say, it's not just about ROI too. I was also going to say customer satisfaction metrics seem to be an important thing that they're measuring as well.
Mm-hmm. I think that's also really key and something that people don't bring up very much. Customer satisfaction, it really leads directly into revenue. But I mean, if your customers are going to be referring you to more people, if they're going to be happier, the retention of them is longer. It's common knowledge that acquiring new customers is far more expensive than just retaining existing customers as well. So that really has a huge impact on your bottom line and really the scale that you can go about your businesses in
Absolutely.
itself.
I couldn't say it better.
Yeah. So I guess in your experience, what separates successful AI implementations from those that do not scale?
Another really important question. All the questions you've asked so far are really, really good. So I'd say the main differentiator is the clear vision supported by the top, the executive buy-in. So when the leadership drives the initiative, it sets the tone for the entire organization, as opposed to a bottom-up approach. Another thing I'd say that's kind of what I've seen in my personal experience of what separated successful implementations versus unsuccessful ones has been the quality of the data and the infrastructure. So the AI is really only as good as the data that it consumes. And if the organization hasn't invested in quality data infrastructure up front, then the AI implementation itself is not going to be very successful. You need well-organized data pipelines from the very start. And then the other thing I'll say is scalability hinges on an agile mindset. So what I've also seen that really separates the successful project is being able to be iterative, continuous feedback loops. It's not about hitting an end and saying we're done here. It's about continuously improving over time and adapting based on what we find. Starting small never hurts, right? Finding the easiest, most affordable use cases and then kind of building on that.
Yeah. Prove success and then scale it from there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I really liked what you said. I think in particular your first and your last points there, to me in part come down to communication as well. And there's really never a time where somebody can really over communicate. So if it is that top down approach that you need, to have, whether it's the CEO or the CTO or just somebody high up in your organization, to be able to say, this is our vision and this is how we're going to execute on it, the amount of efficiency gain that statement alone, like a really crisp statement that an executive member can provide to an organization that will just help everybody align beneath them, is not to be underestimated. The amount of conflicts that you can see happening of like, where do we want to invest, or is it in AI, is it in this project, is it in that project, to just have somebody come in and very clearly state, this is what we're going to do and this is why we're going to do it, will make a world of a difference within an organization as well.
100%. You don't want to have too many cooks in the kitchen sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. So really you work with organizations of varying AI maturity levels. How do you help them identify and prioritize the use cases that are going to demonstrate value beyond just the efficiency gains that they're looking at?
Another good question. So we kind of have an approach. We basically have a 4-step process, and nothing I'm about to say here is overly complicated, but we kind of take it step by step. So the first step, as you can imagine, is understanding the actual business goals, right? Understanding what the organization's strategic objectives might be. It might just be as simple as increasing revenue. We talked about improving customer retention. That's a really popular one. Reducing operational costs, enhancing decision making, whatever it is, we like to kind of understand what are the goals of the initiative. And that's kind of where we start the conversation and the dialogue. And usually the organization knows what their goals are. So that's where we start. The second step then is to assess the pain points and the opportunities. So we like to work with cross-functional sessions. So we like to talk to stakeholders from different teams. So obviously, like I mentioned, the leadership takes the initiative and it's their vision. But from there, we like to get in the weeds and talk to different teams, understand where they're struggling, understanding where their challenges are, or where their hidden opportunities are. And for example, we have a retail client initially they wanted to focus on optimizing their inventory. But later we realized that personalizing their customer experience would have a far greater impact. So we deprioritized one and prioritized the other based on these sessions. It's amazing how sometimes just talking to people from different teams and having everyone come together makes a big difference there. The third step then is evaluating impact versus feasibility. So just because something is potentially high impact doesn't mean it's easily feasible, right? It doesn't mean that it's going to be a cakewalk to set it up. And sometimes you'll kind of hear me say throughout this that sometimes just going for the lowest hanging fruit makes the most sense, right? So we like to evaluate, yes, how much of an impact this will have, how positively this will impact the organization, but also how easy is this? Are we about to be getting ourselves in a really deep trouble here if we go down this rabbit hole and find ourselves in a world of complexity we weren't prepared to deal with? So that's kind of important. That's our step 3, is understanding feasibility versus impact.
Mhm.
And then the last step here, I think you actually mentioned it earlier on your own here, is intent to scale. So we like to pilot with the intent to scale, right? We design pilot projects that are scalable from the outset. The goal isn't just proving a concept, but building a foundation for enterprise-wide implementation. So I'll give you an example, because that kind of sounds vague. We have a client in the e-commerce industry, and we implemented an AI-powered recommendation engine for just a subset of their product categories that they want to start with. And we were able to get around a 15% increase in average order value during that pilot. So we actually took that same project and expanded across the entire catalog, which of course increased revenue and customer satisfaction because they were getting better recommendations. And recommendation algorithms are nothing new, but AI is sort of taken to the next level. And we started small and we built on it. So that's our 4-step approach that has really paid off
Yeah.
for us so far.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, and I really like this. I like the feasibility piece in particular, and I think it comes back to what you were saying earlier, that you also have to have a culture of experimentation and adaptability, because if it's not feasible, you do have to adjust what you're doing. It's not that it was completely wrong. It's just you have to modify it a bit. Maybe you were thinking too big, there's too many components to it. So start a little bit smaller, solve a smaller problem, and then build it up to this much bigger issue that you have. But you really have to get something working first to then also get more buy-in and more budget to do more, typically.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm repeating myself now, but ultimately it's about starting small and not trying to do too much too fast.
Yeah. So let's just dig into that a bit and talk about measurement in a bit more detail. So, what frameworks are you using to evaluate AI ROI that capture both the quantitative and the qualitative impacts that they're having?
Yeah, I'll start by saying it really does vary case by case, and often our clients will come in with opinions already. But
Naturally.
yeah, but we do evaluate ROI using a combination of both the quantitative and qualitative metrics that you mentioned. Quantitatively, I'll say some that are kind of universally accepted, right? Cost savings, revenue growth, adoption rates is a big one that I don't think is talked about nearly enough. How often are people actually using the stuff that we're implementing? And then, survey results, like customer CSAT scores and things like that are a big part of it as well. Because ultimately, a lot of this is about the customer. But we also like to use qualitative insights, even things like employee feedback, open-ended text, shifts in customer behavior that maybe are more qualitative than quantitative in nature. For one project, we used a balanced scorecard approach, for example. And quantitatively, we tracked operational efficiency. We saw a 10% increase in customer satisfaction scores, but we also incorporated user feedback that was open-ended, and that was actually really helpful as well. And that holistic view really helps stakeholders see the full value of the adoption just beyond the numbers. I really like to let people just write it out. Sometimes a 1 to 10 scale or something like that doesn't tell the story.
Yeah.
It's about kind of letting them speak and let them kind of interpret it on their own.
Yeah. And you learn a lot about what you need to do and what you need to adjust when you have the right data also to see how are they interacting with it so you can improve it over time.
Yeah, I love just watching people work and seeing how they interact with tools. I think that tells a lot that you can't measure always.
Yeah. I think actually many years ago, I was actually coding it was like a landing page, I think. And we were just having some users walking through it. And just to see their reaction or where they get caught up on makes a huge difference. And things that, like when you're designing something, whether it's like, just a simple UI project or a more complex application, you don't really understand what the user is going to do. I mean, it could be a simple color on the page that they are reacting to as well, or a prompt that you have in a text box that changes how they actually will use and adopt the system. So there can always just be small tweaks that you do by watching what the user is doing that can really improve things. It's not always like these massively complex changes.
Absolutely. And that's not just AI, right? I mean, even simpler things like website design, that's very common practice. And there's also something called A/B testing where we like to experiment with different versions of the same thing with very small differences between them, like color, for example, as you mentioned, and just see how that impacts people's behavior.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So you've also been helping organizations build custom and off-the-shelf AI solutions. Can you walk us through the decision framework you use when are advising people on building versus buying?
Yeah, absolutely. It really depends use case to use case. The decision starts with understanding the business need. And usually, unless the use case is specific or it's proprietary or it's really, really tailored, we would rather go off the shelf first and save time and resources. And especially, I mean, we talked about this in the very beginning. 2025 is sort of going to be the AI boom, right? And there's going to be more and more tools available than ever before. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. All these cliches. And so we'll basically use off the shelf solutions and work with them when applicable. And if it's not, if depending on the use case, if that's not the right situation, again, if it's proprietary or it's really targeted, for example, a logistics company we worked with needed an AI tool tailored specifically for their unique supply chain challenges. Only then will we really go custom, right? And sometimes what ends up happening is a hybrid where Some pieces of this will be just sort of be out of the box, and some pieces will be very custom. But we try to not rebuild things that have already been built when not necessary, especially because it's more expensive. It takes more time to get it to market and ready and to iterate on, of course. And then, of course, we have to also consider whether or not the organization's in-house expertise is prepared to deal with these custom solutions.
Yeah, just maintaining it, like the cost to maintain something and host it as well, can add up quite a bit on top of all of that.
Oh yeah, cost, time is money, right?
Absolutely. So many organizations are struggling with AI governance and risk management. How are you seeing the most successful companies that you're working with balance innovation while also taking into consideration responsible AI development?
Yeah, it's funny because this is one that I'm not seeing everyone adopt on, but there are some indicators that I've seen some things that have been. I'll say this: you can be successful without these things, but if you are implementing these things, then you're way more likely to be successful. So one thing I've seen is that these organizations that are consistently successful on AI governance so far, they have official ethical guidelines and review boards. So they're actually, formalizing their processes. They're having official written documentation around it, and they have personnel who are dedicated to sort of to assess potential risks, rather. So that's a big thing I've noticed is that some of the bigger enterprise clients are getting into the review board space here. The other thing I'll mention is just transparency, right? You need to communicate how AI decisions are made and ensure fairness. How is it going to impact everyone in the organization? How is it going to impact the stakeholders? Transparency really is key here. And we have one client in the financial services sector, I should say, who implemented explainable AI models just to ensure regulatory compliance while maintaining innovation in their credit decision processes. And that was one use case where they really implemented it really effectively.
Yeah. I think on the transparency note, I think we're seeing more and more buyers wanting to see more transparency in the people that they work with, and especially like younger generations as they start getting into like the buying level roles. They start to look forward, is this a company that has values and actually, practices what they preach as well? And people are more and more so looking for that. And it's part of like the value of what they're looking for. It's not always, is it the most cost effective solution, but is this a company that I actually want to be associated with as well?
Yeah, I mean, everyone wants to work with or interact with companies that they trust, right? So, and I agree with you that I do think it's a younger generation thing for sure. That is influencing a lot of this, which is
Yeah.
a good thing. I think that makes me feel a little more positive about the future.
You have to grasp all of the positives. So,
Exactly.
so looking at the specific applications, where are you seeing the most transformative impact of generative AI in data analytics and decision making?
A few places. I'll just name a few. I'm not going to capture everything here, I'm sure, but the first I would say is personalized customer engagement. Uh, so it enables hyper personalized interactions, and that's something that's we've been going in this direction for years, but AI is really taking it to the next level, leveraging customer data to generate tailored content, tailored offers, tailored recommendations. I think we mentioned an e-commerce client earlier, providing dynamic product recommendations to adapt to the customer behavior in real time. So that's pretty great because customers change too, right? Their behaviors change as well. So it's not just about recommending things based on who they are in a static moment of time, but who they are and how they're changing. So that's one really cool way that we've seen AI sort of have a transformative impact. Another way I would say is content creation. Gone are the days where you have 100 members of your marketing team and they're all coming up with unique, snappy headlines. Generative AI now can produce everything from product descriptions to targeted ad copy. And it's not just about the fact that it can do it, right? It's about how fast it can do it. It's
Hmm.
reducing the time and cost of manual content creation.
Yeah.
Smaller teams, even forgetting about the fact that it's not just that it's replacing people, it's that it's making people's lives easier. It's making the teams more effective with their time. It's speeding them up. In one project, we helped a franchise build like this localized marketing materials for 100 plus locations. And just imagine how much turnaround time that reduces. I mean, from weeks to hours, really, when you think about it like that.
Yeah.
I got a couple more examples here. Let me think. All right. Well, I guess you mentioned data analytics. So in predictive analytics, it's really just helping save time in the data preparation. Thinking about, I mean, my background originally, way back in the day, was just a data analyst. That was my sort of my first job out of school and everything. And a big part of what used to be a data analyst was data preparation, going through, making sure the data was high quality, filling in missing information or dealing with it, making sure the data was clean and ready to be analyzed. And AI can really scrub and clean up the data in a format in a way that saves a lot of time for these analysts, so they can spend more time on higher value tasks and more strategic thinking. That's another big way.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm sure I could go on and on.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that there's a ton of different ones, and it comes down to it really helps enable people. And in particular, the ones related to marketing, naturally, I can relate to quite a bit. And part of it is it also just helps you brainstorm, or if you have a question, instead of asking somebody else and, taking an hour of their time to explain a concept, if perhaps you're a new employee, you can actually go to generative AI and say, teach me this new concept, because realistically school teaches a lot of theory. It doesn't teach a lot of like the more practical things that happen, and inevitably, especially right now, things are moving faster than standard curriculum can keep up with. So just having essentially a tutor that you can have on demand to explain new concepts. Maybe you're going after a new industry, maybe it's a new product market, maybe it's a new region, and you're just trying to understand it better. So you can also just, relate more to the content that you're having to create or the product you're trying to position. All of that can help quite a bit. So it's really there to help enable you a
Yeah,
lot.
absolutely. And that's kind of the direction we're going. Is everyone's going to have their own little AI virtual assistant.
Yeah.
And I'll just give you an example. ADP, the big payment processing company, they have ADP Assist now for their own internal employees, and it's personally trained on all of their own data.
Hmm.
Uh, it's all about it. Basically, they're trying to do exactly what you're describing here, which is sort of give everyone their own personalized resource. And of course, we all know about ChatGPT and things like that, but organizations are investing in their own internal versions of that.
Yeah. No, I think it's quite cool to have. So just to jump into the human side a bit more, how do you see the role of data analysts and business leaders evolving as AI is becoming more embedded?
Well, I want to be. I'm going to start optimistic, and then I'll sort of say the downside. I wish I could sit here and tell you that it's all going to be positive and that the future is going to be without any friction. But I am concerned that there's going to be some challenges that we see ahead. So I'll start positive though. I'll start on a positive note. So it will empower analysts and leaders, right? I mean, AI is automating many repetitive tasks like data. I mentioned data cleaning, basic reporting, freeing analysts to focus on higher value activities such as interpreting AI generated insights. Basically allowing analysts to become more consultative in nature, right? And spending less hours on the tedious back end, making sure the wires connect, so to speak.
Hmm.
And of course, leaders, from a leader's perspective, better decision making and faster decision making. I think obviously better decision making speaks for itself, and having more accurate insights. But I think that we also forget how fast the world moves, and being able to have up to date decision power, up to date information that is quick, and insights that are able to sort of help you make decisions fast. That's sort of an underrated advantage. Speed is everything in today's world. Whether it's good or bad, that's kind of the world we're living in today.
Hmm.
So that's the good, but there's the bad too, right? We've already seen this. I think we saw Mark Zuckerberg recently announced that Facebook's going to be laying off a ton of their mid-level engineers, and I think that we're about to see probably a layoff wave this year. And tech definitely is one of the starting places, but I'm seeing this across many organizations across different industries. I am concerned that there's going to be a massive threat of layoffs and role redundancy. And earlier I was talking about marketing, right? And saying how, you don't need this big of a marketing team anymore. You'll still need some people, at least for the time being, but you don't need everyone. And it basically allows people to do more work with fewer resources. And I'm worried that there's going to be a lot of role redundancy there. Hopefully that there's going to be some reskilling that happens, but that's always been a challenge throughout history, right? And getting people to change what they've been doing to to learn new skills and how to work with the AI as opposed to an alternative to the AI. I think ultimately it will be positive in the long run, but there's going to probably be a really rough intermediate period. And I know that's probably not the most positive answer in the world, but we do have to talk about both the pros and the cons.
Yeah. So I think what you said, I mean, it certainly makes sense. I think certain people are already feeling it as well. But to your point, it comes back to kind of what you were alluding to perhaps a bit earlier. Well, culture within an organization, but it's also if you extend that concept that you were talking about and really apply it to each individual. If you have a mindset of adaptability and change and being okay to learn new skills, whether it's a totally new skill set or just a new way of approaching your job with it, I think you are far safer in any organization as well, because you do just have to think different. In part, you have to think, you have to speak to an AI a bit differently than you would speak to a human. So there's a little skill to, learning prompting conversation versus, your day-to-day conversation. But realistically, if you are someone who really brings a value add to the table and can think outside the box and is willing to learn new technologies and learn how to implement them within your organization, you're probably in a stronger state right now than you were previously as well, because that's definitely what people are still looking for, is how to bring this into organizations.
Yeah, outside the box is the key phrase there. I think outside the box thinking is going to be way more valuable than it's ever been. It's
Mm-hmm.
always been valuable, but it really becomes like there's gonna be less skill around knowing specific rather technical documentation, and more value around critical thinking, creativity, so on.
Yeah. Just a side story there. One of my good friends is a teacher, and when I was in school growing up, it's like you have to memorize all of your math tables. And now, because of course the teachers used to say you won't always have a calculator on you, and now obviously we do always have a calculator on us as it ends up. And so what they're saying is, I don't have kids, but for people who have kids in school, they've changed the style of the curriculum to make it a lot more about critical thinking rather than memorization as well, because we have things that will always tell us, like facts that are happening. We can always look things up, or you're rarely in a scenario in, I guess, most of the Western world at the very least, that we don't have access to those pieces at any given point of time. So it also changes how generations are learning. So it'll be interesting, to your point of like, there might be a period of instability, but then it's going to change again, of course, as more people come in and as it gets more implemented into our day-to-day in the workforce.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm really curious to see how this changes the minds of our youth and how they think.
Mhm.
Not just how they work, but how they think. So
Yeah. Well,
it'll be fun
just
to
as a
watch it play
final
out.
question and to end on a positive note, so as we look towards 2025 and beyond, what should organizations be doing to prepare their data and their teams for all of this AI implementation and to move them out of the pilotitis?
Investing in good data, right? We talked about that earlier. It's really, really important that you invest not just in the AI, but what's feeding into your AI, right? That's one of the most important things. And then from a more personal perspective, we've got to train our people, right? We've got to prepare ourselves the best we can. And it's going to be kind of scary because we don't even know what the future holds yet fully, right? But as long as we're doing our best to stay on top of it and educate ourselves and reskill ourselves to the best of our ability, I think most organizations will be okay.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Charlie, this was a fun conversation. I enjoyed the insights, especially the different applications that you have and the stories that you shared on what your clients are doing. There's lots of possibilities, I think, at the end of the day. And so I think the frameworks that you shared of building a culture, starting top down and looking for the feasibility of what is available to you is really key. So thank you for sharing all of that.
I'm happy to have you on. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of Decisions Now. Check out all episodes at evalueserve.com/podcast, and don't forget to subscribe for future episodes.